All right. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Monetizing Your Mental Capital. I'm your host, Will Christensen, and I have Scott Needham here. Scott, it is a pleasure to be on a podcast again with you.
Aha, but this time you're the host.
This time I am the host. Yes, usually in the last two times we've been on a podcast together, it's been the other way around. Very excited to chat with you a little bit more about your mental capital. Tell us, why would it, I think a lot of sellers know who you are, Smartest Amazon Seller Podcast and things like that. But if a seller or an agency owner were listening to this podcast and they didn't know who you were, who are you and what monetizing of mental capital have you done before?
Well, shoot, that's a pretty broad term, but here's what I've done. I've sold on Amazon for 11 years, grew one of the largest resellers in the world. I think for a little while I know there was a point in time where we had more products in FBA than anyone else. So we built a lot of systems. So, a lot of Amazon specific knowledge about operation. That's what I spent years on. And then I did one thing where I leaned into the community. I was like, oh, there's something here. And so I probably spent the last 4 years realizing the size of the e-commerce and Amazon communities, being a part of it, going to dozens of meetups, and I was able to take some of the knowledge that I built from selling, and I turned it into a software product. And yes, I do sell on Amazon, and it's December, so I actually really care about how we're positioned. But the real truth is, I spend more of my time thinking of needs for Amazon sellers and what I can do that would be new and unique. And I've monetized that. It's turned into a business with 29 employees, and we didn't take in any funding. And some of our ideas have worked. Not all of them have.
Yeah. Well, and that's the nature of it, right? You go on a journey, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Go back with me for just a moment, and let's think of the first time you monetized mental capital. For some people, for my daughter, this will be, well, I figured out that I could borrow lemonade from my parents' pantry and set up a stand. And she actually does lemonade stands on the regular in the summer. And it is amazing to me how often she sells a cup of lemonade for $20 just because somebody thinks it's so cool that she's out on the corner. I'm like, just too cute for your own good. So that she monetized some of her mental capital by recognizing, wait a minute, I'm cute. I can go sit on the corner with this cup of lemonade and I can make some cash to look at that. So when you go ahead,
help define mental capital. Are you thinking software, audio? I don't know.
You name it. So I like to look at this as an opportunity where you either switched careers because you figured out, oh, I have this hack, or I know that, like one guy, he was an intern and he was getting paid to do a bunch of VBA stuff, and they wanted him to do extra, and they offered him pizza. And he was like, wait a minute, what? I've got to, and he went and actually switched to a whole nother career, paying way better, just doing VBA and that kind of stuff. And so he used his knowledge to do a salary jump. I've got another guy who was like, hey, I actually, with 5 of my friends, charged a hospital $1 million to install Cat 5 all over their entire thing. And so they took on a gig, and they took knowledge they knew of networking and did consulting. So think about the first time you did consulting, or the first time you shifted around. What did you do to monetize that knowledge?
My brother first sold on Amazon, and when I heard his problems, I made that shift. I don't know if I'm an Amazon seller, I'm an Amazon developer. When I jumped on, I was just improving his ability to sell. And yeah, I became a partner, but it was my background of software that actually, I came back to the family business. I didn't want to do that, but if the opportunity was too good. So, software development did help.
What were you doing right before then? You were a software developer?
Yeah. I was building an Android app for the State Department.
So you were working for the state, great benefits, not awesome pay usually is how that rolls.
Yeah. I was actually working for a contractor for them. So
okay.
Still good and stable, but not quite as regimented.
Okay.
Nope, that's exactly what I was doing.
Building an Android app for the state of Utah.
No, the Department of State.
The Department of State. Okay. All right.
Federal.
Was it
So
an internal use Android app or was it an external?
no, no external. It was basically the State Department's careers tracks laid out in an app. So like if you could jump into their website, learn about all their different tracks, where they're going to be when they're doing hiring events. The State Department is a very tricky place to get a job. On
Yeah,
top of the fact that it's like federal government, it's also like one that, background checks.
lots of background checks.
There's a variety of tracks of people that get interested in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I was doing. But like that's not exactly like, but the point was is like that experience, I was like, I want to automate and I want to be a partner. So
Beautiful.
those are the two things. And we
Hold
so
on real quick. So you're digging into this Android application and you've done the software development thing. I mean, software development in and of itself, and maybe people don't even recognize this because they aren't software developers, but I have found the more I work with software developers, the more I realize all they are is a bunch of automation nerds. Like they are so focused on efficiency and, well, could I do that again more easily in my code? Like it's amazing how much I see repetition in systems. I mean, it sounds like that's what you were becoming an
yeah,
expert in.
yeah, that's true. I would say but even then, every developer is a little bit differently. Some of them program on the weekends just for their own whims. I found that I just want to solve problems. That's it. And I will work through the weekends if I'm solving a problem. And there was a lot of little things that were really hard and still kind of are if you're growing an Amazon business, you're just getting automation in the right places. So it was just like, building out a PO system that was had some intelligence and worked to save tens of hours of, my brother who, would spend 20 hours making a PO and then he spent a few minutes once you bring all that data in. And so, yeah, that's
I love that you shifted to go help your brother. Were you like at a family party when you very first heard about it? What was going on when you heard about it?
well, he had been selling for about 2 years. And so I kind of set things up. I was like, hey, you should just use the spreadsheet to track your products, like basic things. And and then he started, growing and figuring out a few hacks, but really everything he was doing was just like little hacks instead of full automation. I think we knew for about a year that I wanted to join to like kind of throw some juice on it. And so so that was the business. But like the thing is little did I know that we were going to have a few more shifts. And I think I got a little complacent about selling on Amazon for a few years
Mm,
where like there were fewer things for me to build with my skill set. And boy, do I wish, now that I would have been a little bit more curious because like now, I've kind of hit a different track in the career where I can't, there's just not enough hours in the day to build what we want. And I'm running a more complicated operation where I actually can't spend that much time developing. I lead the developers, but like, man, I wish I could lead a little bit more by like being in the code and solving some things. So talking about those pivots that you mentioned,
mhm.
we actually built a reimbursement tool earlier on, like 2017. I'm like, hey, this is an interesting market. We think we can do well. And so we built it for ourselves and offered it to others. This was a separate business called Valence. And it led me down a track of I just was just doing the development, but one specific thing. I go onto Reddit.
Mhm.
I'm like, this will be fun. This will make a boring day exciting. And I do an Ask Me Anything in the Fulfillment by Amazon subreddit. And I'll be honest, I was really just doing it just for intrigue. I did think it was possible that I was actually very upfront. I said like, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here's how much we sell on Amazon. I can proof of that. Here's the parts that I have expertise on. this, and this. And I did say reimbursements that we had a business on it. I was, and so one or two questions went down that track. And little did we know that like that one thing was more effective at marketing than like, the previous month of work from,
That subreddit was.
yeah, from 3 people. So I was like, so the light bulbs went off for me. I was like, aha, digital marketing. And I'll be honest, ever since that day, I've been like, just like, I'm going to figure out this digital marketing thing and have fun with it, put my personality into it, build an audience. And I thought I was going to get 100,000 Instagram followers. Little did I know that like, that's not really valuable if they're the wrong type of followers. So
Mm.
I had to dig in and be like, okay, no, I want the right audience. If I'm an Amazon seller and I have some services, like, well, I have to bring value to the right people. So
Mhm.
it's better to have an audience of like 1,000 of the right people than 100,000 of the wrong people. So I just started posting on Instagram, making friends with the other, like, every little social media has its corner of like,
Influencers?
yeah. And I spend a lot of time like befriending a few of them and some of the big ones. I got their attention. It's not easy, but you can do it. Once you get their attention, like, I got some cross shares. And then before you know it, post a podcast. These guys are listening to my podcast. And so, a connection's getting made and like, I add them to my podcast. So just a lot of like these little strategies. And before, like more than a year passed. In fact, Will, we probably met during this period. We met before Smart Scout was a thing, but I just knew intrinsically this audience is valuable.
Mm.
And I didn't know what I was going to do. I
Okay,
probably,
so back up just a little bit. As you're looking at this audience, and I think this is a perfect episode for us to focus on this part of the knowledge monetization journey. Because I mean, it's all about monetizing your mental capital. That's what we're here for. We're describing how an Amazon seller can diversify their product portfolio and add some intangible goods, right? That's really what it's about. It's figuring out, how do I take some intangible goods, the goods that are up here in our brains, and turn them into something. And you have really struck onto something that we haven't talked about a lot on the podcast yet. And so I want to dig into that. You saw that, the one tiny, day of digging into that was like, wow, there's this digital marketing thing. Go into that a little more with me. You posted on that subreddit, and that was the best marketing you've had for Valence, for the
yeah,
reimbursement software.
yeah, yeah. That was, well, we just had a few really big sellers come through the door. And,
Mm.
There's something about seeing someone teach in some capacity or in form, sometimes you could call it content marketing, but like there's something about like the process of like giving people insight that just builds trust. So,
Mm.
we could have thrown these people ads like crazy, but if I was transparent and shared my journey, if they relate to something, they see something like, oh, here's this company, Valence, and they approach it a little bit differently. And I'm not saying that I was like, shining down beacons of truth for the AMA, but like I was just telling my experience and figuring out if there's things that I didn't know. And truthfully, I probably did find a few things that I didn't know and still
Mm.
just tinkering around.
Yeah.
And well, the truth is, we actually ended up selling that business later that year. So
Mm.
a few months after, it did give a little bit of tailwind to like have some more of a marketing push. But I think the bigger impact was on me.
Yeah.
And I can take an Amazon selling business, both learn more and offer something of value.
So the aha moment for you was, whoa, because I positioned myself as a teacher, I positioned myself as, hey, I've got knowledge, I'm willing to transfer to you. And in that journey of like that subreddit and they Ask Me Anything, the people who were asking questions, these sellers who were coming and having the same questions, they were like, whoa, Scott must know what he's talking about. I'm signing up for Valence. Like that was
Right.
the aha, right?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is like, I'm so afraid of selling. Like, I don't post on that Reddit anymore. I'm just like, I don't ever like mention what I do. I do comment here and there, but there's this funny dynamic. It still exists even off of Reddit, but like of like, you know, teaching people, but like not feeling like they're sold to. And so I walk that line every day. And I do know the better my insights, the more impact it's going to have on me. So it does matter the quality of the insights that I learn and,
Gotcha.
and share.
So part of what you do now as you consider this audience is hunt for insights.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like Halloween night at 3 a.m. This is unrelated to Halloween, but I just remember that's when it happened. I woke up early and I was like, you know what? I got to get serious about Q4 storage fees and selling through inventory. And I wrote together a piece, and it was really my honest experience. And I think it had some good insights that, like, it had impact versus, you know, other ideas that may feel like a Me Too idea where every other one else has kind of said something similar. But like, if I could say something unique that does impact people's businesses, like, it helps.
That's value.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this aha moment where you're connecting the dots and recognizing, okay, if I can bring some value to the table here, then I'm going to gain trust. And that trust equals, in the Valence case, dollars, right? It was an equation. And so that value flywheel connected in your mind, and you were like, hey, it is now time to build a giant audience. And you mentioned I was going to have 100,000 people on Instagram, which I think a lot of us have been like, I'm going to have 100,000 LinkedIn followers. Or, I mean, I was reading a post from Nathan Hirsch, and he was like, is LinkedIn the next like content platform? Like, and he's just recently hit 30,000 followers on his LinkedIn profile. And so this idea of building an audience, what made you decide, okay, you know what? It's not good to just have everybody. I need a specific audience. And what made you choose e-commerce sellers as an audience? Or is that the audience you did choose?
Yeah, no, that is the audience I chose. I don't care for random people. Like, I'm almost embarrassed of some of the things that I did to like grow, but I figured things out. I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in my lane, and this is the lane that I'm in. But here's two things that I did that I'm ashamed of. Not ashamed, but I was like, that probably wasn't the right thing.
Okay.
I did some giveaways, like not quality giveaways. Like, we're talking things from our shop, like the things that we were selling, probably about $10, $15 of value. And then I'd go on to like these like giveaway Facebook groups and be like, oh, I want to do a giveaway. Come on, everyone. All you have to do is follow, and I'll like give you something. Then I also made it onto the local news. I like reached out to them like, hey, here's my story. You guys should do them. They had me on. And I mean, I kind of cringe, but it's funny. Like, I was putting myself out there. It was a lot of just doing stuff. But then I think the biggest like reality check was like, okay, no, I'm just going to do this podcast. And on my Instagram, I'm just going to talk about selling on Amazon. And that's who I want to connect with. And here's another thing that like, I'm like, oh, that was interesting. About a year into the podcast, I kind of went on tour. This is when I was single. I flew with my audience. I put out an offer like, hey, I'm going to do a dinner in these like 9 cities. And I kind of knew some of the cities had like, a large seller population, or I knew I had some listeners there. And I did it. Flying to these places, do a dinner, usually on average had about 10 people. And then, it was kind of, it was a lot of work getting the logistics, finding a place, communicating, just to connect with people face to face. And I would say it benefited me, but like, man, not worth the effort. I think
Yeah.
if I just would have done better digital marketing, like I think I would have benefited more. But that was the kind of the hustle that I had.
So what were some of, so you just talked about three different strategies: the giveaways, the in-person dinners, and what was the third one you mentioned? Giveaways.
Going on a news.
Oh,
Uh,
and the news, right. So you
yeah,
talked about the local news and the dinners. Thank you. So you've talked about those three strategies, and as you pushed into those were not as effective at harnessing the Amazon sellers audience you were looking for. What was effective? What was the way that you actually did
okay,
build an audience that you were
okay.
hoping?
All three of those things, they weren't a zero. I've used them in various capacities. Even a clip from the news show, like some B-roll stuff. It just brings
Yeah, bring some
credibility
credibility. Yeah.
when I don't. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. And then, so of those three, which was the most valuable? It's hard to say. I'm gonna lean on the dinners because, like, I was with the right audience. That one I was. The other things were amusing, but the dinners, right.
It was the
Now,
right audience.
I would actually back up and say, what of all the things that I have done, what is the most impactful from building an audience and all that? I would say getting shout outs from the right people. That's it.
Mm,
Sharing, say like an Instagram story reshare or this is actually very possible still. Unlike or on LinkedIn, I would like tag them I bring them on my podcast, put them on LinkedIn, tag them, they'd reshare, and everyone sees like my awareness just really goes up. That can work in any vertical still to this day. You bring someone that's like your target, give them something that they want, and then give them a way to like mutually benefit each other. And
mm.
I still think to this day, there's a few small things that you can do that I guarantee you will get their attention. For example, if someone wanted me to reshare them on Instagram, guess all you
Mhm.
have to do? All you have to do is like find three great things about me and tag me. I'm going to reshare it. Like, or like say they listen to this podcast, share it. Say like, here's the top three insights from the podcast. 1, 2, 3. Tag me on a story and I will reshare it because let's go.
Well,
It's
right, yeah, it gives you some social validation. You're
but also on that social validation, it's also informing people.
Yep,
Here's three cool things. So like
yep.
you're giving me what I want. I can teach my audience through someone else's words, not mine.
Mhm, mhm.
And we help each other out. So that's kind of how I see, like, if you were to try and scale, this works in B2C as well. This is not just B2B. But
Mhm.
like you just kind of you work with people that have the right audience
Right.
and make them look good, and you will get their attention. What I would do before I had anyone's experience, I would like every single day, I would tag one influencer and say like one cool thing about them. Then I go to the next day, tag one influencer, one cool thing about them. And every once, I would say about half the time they'd reshare it.
Interesting. So if you were looking for influencers, and obviously the individuals on this podcast that are listening, they may be, totally into video games, and they're selling something that has to do with video games, and they're like, wow, there are so many influencers out there, in that category.
Uh, you can
Well,
break it down. Here's the easiest way to think about this. So I love Russell Brunson's approach to this in his book Traffic Secrets. I think you read the first 4 chapters and you'll like you'll never see it the same again. Every niche has, just think of it that every niche has like 100 people that are like the players. You could call them influencers, but like they're the people that they have expertise, they have trust, they have authority, they know what's cool. You could call it, you could even break down Amazon FBA into a lot of different. There's the advertising influencers,
Hmm.
there's the agency influencers, there's the
Hmm.
wholesale reseller influencers, there's private label influencers. I guarantee you, any of those niches, there's 100 people that if you have their attention, they can bring you in to a degree. And so take gaming. Well, gaming's pretty broad. Yeah, there's some high level gaming influencers that have reach across the entire industry, but probably going to want to focus on a specific game. Let's take why can't I think of I've been thinking of a million games. There's one, Fortnite. Probably 100 people in Fortnite that just like have the audience. Maybe you can't get to like the top tier. Fortnite's maybe a bad example because it's just like it's actually really big. But like think the middle tier, you're like, you know what? You could still get their attention. What do
Hmm.
they want? They want audience sharing. They want to grow their Twitch. They want to do this. So if you can help people accomplish those goals, they'll love you. If you offer them a brand deal, the brands like large multinational brands work in the same way. They're like,
Yeah.
hey Ninja, I'll give you $1 million if you like do this.
Right.
So he does it. They just do it at a larger scale. Sponsorships are the same thing, but we're in the game of free sponsorships.
So I love that. And going after kind of that mid tier for what's there, a couple of hacks that I've used to get the attention of some of the people that I feel like are in that category. Trade shows are actually one of my favorite ways to get in touch with these influencers because they're real people just like you and me. And they're walking around, and most of the time they're wearing a speaker badge. And so if you go up and you make real human connection with these individuals, don't, come in and fawn all over them. It's about, what do you do? What are you looking to do? And maybe even just walk up and say something, introduce yourself, go back and forth. And then I love asking this question of every single person that's here, who do you need to meet? Who should I keep my eyes open so that when I run into this person, I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to meet Scott Needham, right? Like, and if you ask that question, I have found that people are more willing to, law of reciprocity, ask you in return, who do you need to meet? And you can respond and say, well, actually, I need to meet more people like you, right? Like, and this is why I've got this budding podcast or whatever else that's coming out there. So that's one I would say. Another hack that I would say is LinkedIn video is a very underused tool. And I don't mean LinkedIn video like in the feed. I mean LinkedIn video on your instant messaging. So connecting with someone on LinkedIn. So like Scott and I are connected, and then pulling out your phone and pressing the video button and just introducing yourself. Just send over a quick introduction. There's something about connecting with someone's facial pattern and understanding about what's there. You're a lot more likely to get a response, especially if you're genuine about what you're talking about. The last hack that I've heard of recently in this idea of like connecting with influencers is called value commenting. And what you do is you watch the influencer who's posting there, and whatever they post, you go in and you spend 15 minutes coming up with some good insights and your own opinion about whatever it was that they're connected on. And you reply in the thread about what's there. And then you even repost your own stuff around that. And you do that about 3 or 4 times before you attempt to connect with them.
Oh
Bet your
yeah.
biscuits, they read the comments, right? They're looking at the people that are in there. And that's a much, much higher likelihood of being able to connect with them.
Yeah, I like that. I like the value commenting before your ask. I would actually shy away from value commenting just willy-nilly as thinking this is like a part of a grand scheme of things, because the reason I personally stay away from it is because then you just start browsing too much. Like I'm not getting enough value out of this. Like, who wants to scroll feeds all day? I find, yeah, if you got a very specific thing, you can strategize and get around it. I'm more effective on social media with like by using other tools. The main reason why is it just keeps me focused. I don't do the doom scrolling or whatever they call it. If I'm using
Yeah.
other tools, I'm focused on creating stuff.
One specific thing. I love that. So focus your social media energy on building that. What would you say are the biggest roadblocks to building an audience?
Knowing what you're doing with it.
So like the
I had a bu-
purpose.
Well, a realistic expectation. I think it's easy to, like you said, imagine 100,000 followers and miss the mark. I had a good friend of mine. He's a teacher on a teacher's salary, and so like I care about him succeeding on his side ventures because he's got 3 kids. I'm like, this is not low stakes for him. And he like created a podcast, and it was just him telling stories. And I think he was going, which to me, like, it's kind of like a comedic thing. And I'm like, you don't know how hard it is to do a B2C podcast, basically. Not B2C, but you know what I mean? Like you're trying to reach anyone out there that listens.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very hard. And you just got to know that you're in for a long haul. And I saw him quit after a few, about a dozen episodes. And I wish I would have told him in the beginning. I just didn't have the stomach to, but like, just what you're in for, like, know why you're creating the podcast.
Well, I think that goes back to riches and the niches, right? Like,
Exactly.
I was reading, I'm in the middle of $100 million Offers by Alex Ramosi. And he talks about how the more niche you go, the more money you can charge for whatever it is. And it's the same. I have a friend who this is going to sound hilarious. You've never heard of his podcast. Do you know why? It's because his podcast is about the elevator industry, and it's about the things that are coming out in the elevator industry. Did you know the elevator industry actually has conferences? And did you know that the elevator industry has this very small swimming pool of people? He is the podcast for the elevator industry. If you go look like elevator industry podcast, you're going to find Matt Allred, and you're going to see his podcast. He goes to conferences now, and people are like, oh, the podcast guy. Like he's taken his recruiting business, because that's what he does, and he's blown it up because he's the only one doing a podcast in that arena. So riches in the niches, he's probably only got 500 followers, but there are only 500 followers to be had.
I love it. I think every industry, like the more niche you are, the better. I've got a friend that's like, he does financial planning for dentists. And turns out there's actually a pod of dental podcasts because there's more dentists than you would expect as a profession. I think there's more dentists than doctors. You're like, oh, everyone uses the same type of doctor. It's a dentist. And I know like it works for them because, you're hitting such a valuable audience.
If your buddy had been like, you know what? I am going to create a dental humor podcast. Like my podcast is going to be audiences, dentists, and funny stories that I curate that are about things that happen in dental offices. Like he would have been a lot more likely to succeed because he could have gone and found those 100 people who are influencers in the dentist space, and they're not ginormous stars. They're people who want attention and are a little more accessible.
Yeah.
Riches in the niches.
Totally.
In the niches. All right. So I want you to pretend for just a moment that you can make a phone call back to Scott Needham. He's still coding that Android app. You open up your phone and like, holy crap, I can call Scott right now and tell him something about this idea of building audiences or monetizing mental capital. What would you tell him to do that might change his trajectory a little bit and put you in a better place today? What would you call him and tell him?
Build an ERP for Amazon sellers.
Oh my gosh. So at that, like day one, stop everything you're doing and go build an ERP for Amazon sellers. You're going to be a billionaire.
Use your brother's business as a testing bed. If it works for them, make it work for everyone.
Build an ERP for Amazon business. So if you were to drill that down into question.
When you think ERP, think inventory manager, just business manager.
Business manager. Build a business manager for Amazon businesses.
ERP stands for like something resource planner, like
enterprise resource management, I think, or enterprise resource planner. I'm pretty sure is what it's.
Yeah. But if I would have started back then, I would have won.
Okay.
A very valuable software niche.
Yep. Well, there's so many players who have, Chad Rubin's another guest on the podcast, and he did dive into building an ERP and he did win, right? Like he sold that to another company, and he's doing quite well, and now on another venture, right? So
Yeah.
you,
No, I think I could, like, if I started in 2013, I would have been 2 or 3 years ahead of him.
yep, you totally would have. And so now my question is, what question can Scott Needham of the past ask himself to make sure that he doesn't miss out on opportunities like that one? Because that one's a crystal ball one, right? Like, boom, I've got it. I understand it. I know there's a problem. What question could he ask himself to help him come to that same realization that you've made that realization now?
What question would I ask him?
Yeah. So if you were saying, Scott, every day, wake up and ask yourself this question, and that would have led him to the ERP piece of what's there.
I know why I didn't do it.
Okay.
It's a little bit out of laziness.
Ah,
I'd be like, reselling on Amazon is very competitive, low barrier to entry. If I would have helped realize this is going to keep growing, the space is going to keep growing, how about instead of making, competing against a dozen people, like you could enter a market and, you know, rent their, rent them some tools forever and you make money off of all the Amazon sellers.
got it. So
The truth is in 2013, I didn't know how to make a SaaS app. I just couldn't do it. Yeah, I'm a software developer, but like you need a different type of skill set that I didn't have.
So then maybe the thing you would have said is go to a SaaS boot camp. Like go to a boot camp where they can teach you to build a SaaS product.
And that is why I regret building Android apps instead of the other job that was more of the SaaS type of stuff.
Interesting. Interesting. So what you really would have done is you'd have told a few years before that, you would have said, take that other job in the SaaS world more than the Android.
Yeah, I do wish I still kind of am interested in a web development boot camp because like web development is different than software development. And
Yep.
I came from like a hardware computer engineering background. And so I kind of like had to like teach myself some of that stuff. And I never got it on top of it still to this day.
Hey, well, I mean, never got on top of it still to this day, owner of smartscout.com. So yeah, I mean, you're right.
Well,
You don't really have it all figured out. I it's all good.
I connected with someone and hired someone to polish out what I don't have.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And I mean, you're right. Like it's working. We got almost 3,000 users.
I love it. So Scott, as you've dug into this and you've looked at it, I love what you said. Like the two things you would tell Scott Needham of the past is go do a software development SaaS boot camp so that you know how to build a SaaS company. Don't be lazy, right? Look for oceans that are blue that they may take effort to break into from the standpoint of like actually getting a software product up that would work. But beyond that, like paying attention to those markets that are growing. I mean, you look at TikTok right now. I just saw an ad that said TikTok is the highest grossing application out there, period. That is not a game. So like TikTok is an interesting like world that is growing right now pretty rapidly. I have a feeling that they've got TikTok Shop now. So like look for those areas that seem to be growing and there seem to be a lot of momentum around there and dig into that.
Well, I built a TikTok shop this morning. I am waiting for it to get my submission is in review.
There you go. There you go.
We actually have a product that we think might do well, but really it's also just to learn. So,
yep. Yeah, find those emerging markets and dig in on them. Okay, so to wrap out our podcast, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, a full minute. And what you're going to do is we're going to pretend that you just stepped into an elevator with an Amazon seller. And, the elevator is going up. You got about 30 seconds. And he mentions, yeah, I'm an 8-figure seller. We're out there. And so you got 60 seconds to just kind of introduce yourself and a little bit of what you do. And you've done a little bit of that already. But after that, you're going to give us any tips, tricks, or hacks that you have, like books or apps that you found recently that you found super valuable. So first, jump in, and then I'm going to pause you after that and ask you for tips, tricks, or hacks. So you got 1 minute.
Okay.
Stepped into the elevator.
It's a two-way conversation. So I'm going to have a two-way conversation with myself. Hey, what's up? Oh, you sell 8 figures on Amazon? That is incredible. You are the top 0.001%. What do you sell? Oh, I sell these widgets. And I'm like, well, how many of them? Do you have like a brand? Do people know you? Yeah, they kind of know us. We have a little bit of a traction, but not a ton. Okay. Well, what are your problems? Like, I think, being an 8 figure seller, you work just as hard as a 3 figure Amazon seller. It's like, well, our challenges are really a lot of team stuff. We have a hard time getting alignment. We don't, maybe a vision problem. Oh, well, I can at least help you with one specific problem. Do you know what winning means in your segment? Like, what is winning? Is that getting 25% of the market share, 50% of the market share? Awesome. Well, Smart Scout, we give you the full visibility so you know what it takes to win and you see your market share.
Love it. Well, Scott, I gave you a little bit longer on that because you did include his part of the conversation, which I think that's fantastic. Good work. You show him what's winning is like. Kate, tips, tricks, hacks, or books that have made impact on your life recently.
Truthfully, I think Russell Brunson's books, they're great. Traffic Secrets, you
I
will
bought that earlier in the episode.
yeah, you can't put it down. Once you get it reveals a lot. Yeah, the second half of the book focuses on specific channels. It's great, but the first half, it's like, oh, these are this is how you build a marketing engine in which I'll brag for half a second. Like when I think about marketing, I'm like long-term marketing. That's all I think about. And so Smart Scout now gets about 50 trials a day. And so
Wow.
how did we get there? It grew slowly. We started at 1 trial a day, then 10 trials a day, then 25. Now we're about 50, and some days we hit higher than that, but I think we average about 50 to 60. So that book probably has been the core of how I think about things.
I love it. That's fantastic. And I literally, like, you were talking and I was opening up a browser window and I literally bought that book while we were on this episode. So
Now you're in Russell Brunson's funnel.
yeah, I'm in the funnel. Well, I am excited. That I think that is a great hack and appreciate your time on the podcast today.
Thanks, Will.
How can everybody get in touch with you?
Shoot. LinkedIn, Instagram. Instagram is at Smartest Seller. LinkedIn, just Scott Needham.
Love it. All right, over and out.